record button, which I have now. So let us begin with anyone who would like to start, or we can, by default, we could do it in alphabetical order, which would take us to Denny. But who would like to begin?
You want me to go?
Sure.
All right. Well, my name is Denny Barcy. I am a 2019 graduate of Wayne Law, 2016 of Wayne undergrad. I work at Rock Central. It's a in-house role. Rock Central is part of like the Quicken Loans family of companies. So we offer services to pretty much every company within the FLC, what they call it. So Quicken Loans, Bedrock, Amrock, all the different companies that are within that umbrella. I'm going on a little more than a year onto my role so far. I enjoy working in-house. I'm on the contracts and transactions team. So a lot of my job is, redlining contracts, negotiating different types of agreements, MSAs, things like that nature. I also work a lot in the marketing department. So we do some sponsorships. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the most recent ones with like Larry Fitzgerald, for example. That was a pretty cool project that I worked on. And I don't know, I think that's about it. Anything else, Dr. Raw, that you hit off at top, or is that good?
Well, we can get back around to various other things. You might want to say like when you graduated, what your major was, and where you went to law school and all of that.
For sure. So graduated Wayne undergrad 2016, political science, major with a minor in business, and then graduated Wayne Law in 2019. Whoever's next.
We can continue on in alphabetical order, which would take us to Christopher.
All right, my name is Christopher Candela. I graduated from Wayne State in 2016 and from Michigan State College of Law in 2020, just this past May. I'm currently clerking for a judge in Ingham County as the 30th Circuit Court. I'm in the family division, so we handle, the divorce, custody, abuse and neglect, personal protection orders, juvenile delinquency, those sorts of matters. So it's a new area of law for me because I hadn't actually taken a family law class in law school. So I kind of jumped into the deep end and learned it as I went. But if anybody has questions pertaining to that area of law, I'm certainly willing to answer those. And if there's anything else, Dr. Roth, you can let me know.
Okay. Ray.
Hey everybody, Ray Diggs. I graduated from Wayne State back in 2012. I majored in political science. After undergrad, I did Teach for America for 2 years. I was a part of the TFA Corps in Detroit, taught in Detroit Public Schools. After that, I went on to NYU Law School. And while I was there, I also was admitted into the Stern School of Business. So I got my JD MBA. I currently work for the city of Detroit in the mayor's office as a senior advisor, but really I'm just sort of like a project manager for different development projects, mostly in the real estate sphere, but I do work on industrial projects as well. I assist developers with things like revolving around permitting, zoning, construction, infrastructure, things like that. I also sort of lend my voice where appropriate to the mayor for different development projects. Before that, I was at Honigman for a year in their M&A group, and that was an interesting experience. And I also summered quite a bit out at different big law firms in New York City, most notably Kirkland & Ellis. So I have a little bit of that experience as well, so I can answer questions for people who may want to talk about those things.
Okay. Hilaria.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hilaria Assak. I went to Wayne State for undergrad and did a dual degree. So I finished both of my degrees in 2016. I studied political science, Spanish, and international studies. And then I worked for a bit full-time while I was finishing the second degree, and then started law school in 2016. I finished in 2019, just last year, which it feels like it's been way longer than a year since 2019, but here we are. And I actually just started a position with the federal government. I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I'm working out of DC. I work at the Executive Office for Immigration Review. it can get kind of complicated and thorny with the federal government because it is just so highly decentralized, and there are just all these offices and agencies and chiefs and all different kinds of people in all different places. But basically, I work in the executive branch as an immigration lawyer. Like Ray, I had a lot of different experiences also during summers in law school. I'm sure we'll get to that. I think also the term clerk is a little bit misleading to people who are not familiar with it. Basically, you are a government lawyer. Some people are judicial clerks and they work with judges and help write their opinions and advise on them. I'm sure Ray and Christopher can talk about that a little bit more. And some people like me are not judicial clerks, but just kind of like federal government lawyers who work just like on advice and policy. So that is a little bit more about me.
And Gergana, finally.
Hello, my name is Gergana. I was an undergrad at Wayne State. I double majored in political science and Spanish. I was also in the Honors College, and I graduated in 2015. And then I started law school at Wayne State in 2016, graduated in 2019. And I started work last September, so I've been working a bit more than a year. Let's see, I work in a corporate law firm. It's a private practice, and my practice group is commercial real estate and finance. And I was also summer associate at my firm. And one of my summers, I was a judicial intern for Judge Friedman at the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. And I was also a research assistant for one of my law school professors. My work is kind of a mix of litigation and transactional. I'd say a little bit more transactional than litigation. And we do commercial leasing, like commercial landlord and tenant disputes, workouts and foreclosures, loan origination, modification. Yeah, so we can talk more about that if anyone has questions.
Yes, we don't really have people who do a lot of litigation in the group that we've got here, which is maybe a little unrepresentative in some respect. We'll have litigators in other programs later in the year. But
if you want, I could text Richard. He might be free. He could jump on if you want.
Yes, well, I could have reached out to him. You could, if he'd like to come on board, he's perfectly welcome. But I don't want him to feel he's an afterthought. We'll get him at a different time.
I'm going to text him right now. He led his first deposition today, so he's feeling pretty good. So yeah.
Okay. Well. So I guess maybe a place to start is, thinking back to what it was like being an undergrad. How is being a lawyer incredibly different from anything you would have envisioned when you were doing your undergrad and thinking about becoming a lawyer? Or maybe it's exactly the same.
I'll give it a shot. Now I'm curious to hear what other people have to say. I think, okay, I think that's a very loaded question. For me, I had this very sort of, Roth can tell you more about it, but I had this very sort of narrow view of how I would sort of construct my career. I would take the LSAT, I would apply to this school, and I would go to big law, and it would just sort of take this sort of linear progression that I thought I understood, and I thought that, I wanted to do M&A, right? But what does that really mean? And I, obviously I had no clue being on the other side of things, but, what I found is that, you sort of walk into the profession thinking that there's going to be all this great training and, people are going to hold your hand and you're going to, figure out how to do things the way you do in school, right? There's sort of like a rubric or a textbook or something that you can follow. And what you quickly find out is that there's none of that. You might have some precedent that you can work with, but the reality is, you're being hired at these different places for your intellect and really, your job is to really be creative and think, right? Like really think about what you're being asked to do and how you can add value to whatever it is that project or assignment is. Or deal or case or whatever you're working on. And that's tough. it's tougher than it sounds, because, you know, I think a lot of times you're in a position where you don't really know what you're doing until you get feedback on it. And that's a difficult thing to internalize and deal with, I think, as a young attorney. You know, I've only been out for 2 years, and I was at Honigman for a year. And you know, I can't tell you how many times I walked into the somebody's office thinking I had it figured out, but really I didn't necessarily take it as far as I could have, or I didn't understand what I was being asked to do. So I think that's probably the most eye-opening thing that I've experienced in just, you know, my short time out of school.
Well, how is life as a lawyer different from what you expected?
I think.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
I think,
Oh, sorry, Denny. Do you want to go first? Okay. I think it's quite different. In undergrad, there is sort of this, it's like a freeing experience of like, you've been with your parents up until you're 18, you've been in your high school, you've been told what to do, where to eat lunch, where to go, how to walk in the hallways, what your locker combination is going to be. And then you get to college and like, sort of nobody's really there to tell you what to do. And then I think, so that is like, that experience I think is very distinct to being an undergrad. And I don't think you're going to like find that sort of freeing experience necessarily in other spaces. But having said that, I think it does sort of pave the way for you to make your own decisions as a practicing lawyer and as an attorney. I would echo some of what Ray said, like, you know, in the academic space as an undergrad, you have so much guidance, you have everybody's looking out for you, everybody kind of wants you to succeed. And that's not to say that it's not necessarily true in the legal field. I think it really depends on what you practice and where you practice, but it can tend to be very competitive. I think I've never worked in a big firm, so maybe others can comment on this a little bit more, but there is sort of this reputation for, you know, everybody wants to elbow you out in order to get to the top. So it's just something you have to like grow accustomed to, I guess. But I think something great about the legal field is that you get to explore your interests. I think a common misperception about lawyers is that you will like specialize in something, I guess, during law school, which isn't necessarily false, but everybody has a law degree and everybody who passes the bar has a law license. Which is to say that I practice immigration right now. If I wanted to switch to family law tomorrow, I could do that. Of course, I would need a lot of experience and need to do a lot of research. And if I wanted to go to court with somebody to help defend them when they get a traffic ticket, I could certainly do that as well. So that, in that sense, I think there is kind of like a broad scope and it's something to get used to. Yeah, so I would say those are sort of the distinctions and some similarities as well.
Danny?
yeah, and I agree with Ray. So everyone is busy. Once you get to to our jobs, everyone around you is busy. There's work to be done. There's so much stuff that needs to get taken care of. With that being said, there's like two different avenues that you can kind of go through that, right? The way I did is I was always in the beginning to kind of build trust, raising my hand constantly, you know, I'll take this, I'll take this, I'll take this. And then you find yourself at a point where Ray was saying, it's like, I've taken on so much, but I don't know this much, right? Like I have this whole workload here next to me that I just raised my hand for and I said I can do it, but I don't know enough of it. But you have to realize what Ray was saying as well is that you have to have that confidence in yourself. You know, like you're in this room for a reason. You know, you've shown yourself through all the different, you know, tests and trials, everything like that. So once you get to it, just kind of have that confidence in yourself. You know, get to work, ask questions, as much questions as you need to ask out there. But the main thing for me was finding that confidence. I think that is super important once you get to this point.
Well, since you were my research assistant, you should be just brimming with confidence.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, that fueled it for sure.
So, who is next?
I can comment a little bit on this. I certainly agree with everything that's been said. I think probably the biggest difference is, geez, I enjoyed undergrad so much and even law school to an extent. And then you start working and it's so incredibly different from everything that you've done. And law school, I think, is very sort of litigation focused. I mean, all you do in class is read cases for the most part, unless you take some kind of more practical class or a clinic. And if you don't want to do litigation and you're interested in transactional work, when you start doing transactional work, it is very, very foreign. And it's a different language, a different way of drafting things, everything. And you're really not trained. I can't emphasize that enough. There's so little that I learned in law school that I actually apply on a daily basis. And just like Denny said, everyone is very busy. And so it's kind of hard to find a mentor like you might have in college, whether that's an advisor or a professor that you really like that helps you with a whole bunch of different things. And people just want their work to be done, and they just kind of throw it at you and you learn as you go. Some are better at giving advice and teaching than others, but it just kind of really depends. So I'd say that that's probably the biggest difference between undergrad, law school, and then working.
Yeah, I would have to echo a lot of that about the difference between undergrad and law school. Law school definitely is a different approach. You're now reading cases and being called on and asked questions about those cases, where in undergrad, for a large portion of your classes, can kind of sit passively by, take notes, prepare for your exams, or write your essays and move on. Law school isn't quite that easy to stay undercover, I guess. My perspective of what I would be doing, or what a lawyer would be doing from undergrad to law school, I think certainly changed drastically for me, because I think as an undergrad, the position of law clerk wasn't really on my radar. I'm not even sure I knew what a law clerk was until I got to law school and started hearing people talking about this position that you can do after law school, where you get to work with a judge. And so the kind of image I had in my mind as an undergrad of being, the person standing in front of the judge making an oral argument or making an opening statement to a jury has not been something that I've had the luxury of experiencing yet in my career, but most likely will at some point. But one of the greatest benefits, I think, of clerking for a judge is that you do get that incredible mentor-mentee relationship that you might not get in a private firm, because you are working very closely with a judge. You're doing a lot of research and writing. You're reading, cases constantly. You're keeping up to date on the case law, but you're also conferring with the judge, and you're getting feedback from the judge on the work that you do, and you're getting insight from someone who's been practicing law for such a long time that is really valuable to your career as you're starting out. So I think in that way, my start to my legal career has been certainly different from what I would have ever imagined as an undergrad.
We are joined by a special guest star from New York City, the other Diggs brother, Richard Diggs. How are you?
Professor, I am okay. I actually just finished a deposition less than an hour ago, so I had to sort of decompress a little bit, clean myself up, and hop on. Once I heard you all were doing this call, I decided, hey, why not? I should join. So, hello, everyone. I don't know if you all have done introductions,
Sure.
but my name is Richard Diggs, Wayne State grad, class 2012. Wow. Can't believe it was that long ago. And afterward, I did TFA in Detroit Public Schools. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, Detroit Public School educated. And after that, went to NYU Law, graduated. I clerked for a couple federal judges. Now I'm back out here in New York, where I went to school, and I'm currently at a firm called McDermott, Will & Emery. It's mostly known for healthcare work, both on the private and litigation side. And I primarily do ERISA litigation, healthcare litigation. And so ERISA benefits claims are related to either medical or surgical care, or also what we call these days behavioral health, which is mental health and or substance abuse treatment. So that's what I do.
Okay. Well, you're just coming fresh from having taken a deposition, and I'm not sure how many of the people who are here with us know what that entails. And so also you're the one real litigator of the group that we have here. So perhaps you can explain to people not only what a deposition is, but what it's like to actually be in the thick of one.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'm sure you all have seen on TV at some point or in a movie at some point, you know, what a deposition might look like. There's usually a room. There's one person who's the witness being presented to testify. And there's a defendant lawyer, and then there's a lawyer who's on the offensive, who we would say is taking the deposition, which is what I did today. I took a deposition. And basically, what you're doing is using the discovery that's been produced in the case up until that point, or from your investigation up until that point. You're using that discovery, and you're questioning the person who's been presented to testify about that evidence or discovery that's been produced in the case thus far. And sometimes you get a witness who talks a lot, depending on the type of litigation. Every once in a while, like the litigation that I'm involved in now, none of the witnesses say anything because it's two very massive corporations, and everyone is trying to make sure they don't say anything that'll get their company in trouble. And to be frank, they can get pretty nasty, these depositions. People are not nice, especially experienced litigators. They come after you, and they came after me today, and I had to respond to that. Um, one word of advice for any of you who plan to take depositions one day is when someone is objecting to you constantly, and they will, just be calm and keep going. So just think about that years from now when you're taking a deposition. But I think that's a simple rundown of what it is. I don't know if you would like me to elaborate more. Oh, I will say it's nothing like it looks on TV. Usually, it's usually, well, in my case, a bunch of fancy lawyers in a room with one person, treating that person really, really nice, getting all type of breaks and food and everything. So it's not like the nasty stuff that you see on like Law and Order or something like that.
Okay. So, what else? Well, there are a lot of places to go with all of this. I guess one thing that I'm curious to have people talk about is what it is that they did as undergrads that was relevant to what they're doing now, what they wish they had done more of as an undergraduate to prepare them for what they're doing now. Basically, what the relationship is between their undergraduate education and their day-to-day experiences of being lawyers. Right?
So I talked about M&A earlier, and one of the key responsibilities for doing M&A early on in your career is really being a project manager, right? So, you're not going to be the person negotiating deal terms. You might do it with regarding some like ancillary documents, but the purchase agreement is really going to be the domain of that senior associate or junior partner, whoever you're working with, if you're at a law firm. And the one thing that became apparent to me immediately was how much value having a project management was to the deal, right? So for me, my year at a firm really was spent making checklists, following up on different items, sort of doing due diligence, reviewing documents related to companies that we were purchasing or selling. But you are really a project manager, and you add value as a junior associate by being a great project manager. You're sort of managing up to your superiors, keeping everything organized and keeping everything structured, because you really don't know how to do the job that they're doing yet, right? Like that comes with time and it comes with reps. But I think project management. So, I think any opportunities you have, you guys have group assignments and things like that. I think it's always good to lead those projects. And I know you don't necessarily want to be that person, but I think there's a lot of value in just getting accustomed to being the leader of a project, managing your team members, managing the deliverables, because it will be important later on. And if you could develop the earlier you develop a good system, the better off you'll be later on, I'll say.
Okay. Thoughts? Who else?
I can go. Oh,
You can go.
okay. So yeah, organization and time management is huge. Really important skill. Also, things that I did, I took, obviously political science is a great major to have before you go into law school, because it teaches you how to research and write, and that is something that I do constantly as an associate. You know, partners don't want to look for answers if they don't know it. They're just going to hand it off to an associate to go on to Westlaw or LexisNexis so that we can find the answer. And writing is also very important. Whether you're in litigation or transactional work, you know, someone's always going to need a memo on something. So that's something that I did, which I think helped in law school and is helping me now. Something I guess I wish I had done is maybe try to work in a law firm as a clerk or as a some kind of assistant, just to get a feel for what it's like, because I really didn't know what it was like. You know, my first experience was as a summer associate, and even that is very different from being an actual associate. So that's something that some people might want to consider if they're interested in the law, but they're not sure if it would be a good fit. And yeah, being part of organizations, I think helped. I used to help lead the PLSA, and it kind of gives you just these soft skills like networking or speaking in front of a crowd. That can also be helpful, I think.
So I think one of the best benefits that I got from law school was developing my writing ability, or from undergrad, sorry. Certainly legal writing is very different from what the type of writing that you do in undergrad, but learning how to clearly communicate through writing and to do it in an effective and concise form is very valuable in the practice of law. From the law clerk perspective, I read briefs and motions that are filed by attorneys every day. And a lot of times, the ones that are the most effective are oftentimes the ones that are very clear, very concise. They get to the point quickly. They're well organized. I don't have to read through them and then go back and search for what it is that they're asking the court to do, or what it is that, you know, is the support, the legal citation or support for their argument. So those skills you can start to develop in undergrad, and certainly a lot of Dr. Ross classes are writing focused. And I learned a lot of those skills in his class and other political science classes, because you do a lot of writing and the professors are willing to sit down with you and go through multiple drafts of those. And, you know, the amount of grammar that I learned from the beginning of undergrad to the end is very important. And it certainly makes a difference when you do get to law school and you start to learn the legal writing styles and how that differs from what you've been doing for 4 years in undergrad. At least you're not struggling with some of those foundational things like grammar and structure and organization, that if you don't have that solid foundation, could be another added struggle to your first semester of law school, which is already somewhat overwhelming to begin with.
Yeah, and I'll add on the back end of what Christopher just said, and a lot of you all won't like this. I don't know who all is undergrad student on this Zoom meeting, but
Richard, we're being recorded too, just FYI.
Okay, that's fine. You should actually take the courses that require you to do research papers and presentations. Why do I say that? Because when you're in my position, when you're in a law firm associate, not only do you have to be clear and concise and get to the point with your answers, but people want feedback. I think the way to stand out as a young attorney, and people always talk about organization, like my brother talked about organization, but what I found to be a way to stand out early is to actually have something meaningful to contribute beyond being on top of sort of all of the organizational tasks that you ultimately be responsible for. And you just never know when the partner's going to look to you and say, well, what do you think? And if you haven't thought about it beyond the organizational point, you won't have anything to say. But in my position, I've had the rare opportunity to provide significant feedback on a number of issues in a number of cases, which ultimately led to me getting greater responsibility, such as taking depositions and things of that nature. And so you want to be thinking about the type of courses that require you to develop your own original thoughts, so research papers and presentations, because you have to get on your feet and respond to people in the audience. So I think those things are very helpful.
Yeah, I think
Larry, were you?
oh, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a lot to say about this topic. What did I do in undergrad that sort of helped, and what did I wish I knew, or what did I wish that I could do better? I think the biggest thing for me was getting involved. I was arguably over-involved, and so I will make a note about that in a second, but volunteering is still a very big part of who I am and what I do. Community service is really important to me. I think Wayne State is an excellent place to get involved. The experience that I learned about diversity, different kinds of people from different backgrounds. I mean, I went to high school in Troy, so it was very different than going to school in Detroit and being with people from like different backgrounds, not only like ethnically, racially, kind of like on the outside, but also like being in class with like moms who had to bring their kids, or being in class with like veterans, or being in class with immigrants that don't speak English very well, or whose first language is not English. So many different experiences coming into Wayne State that I don't think you find at more sort of like traditional college town universities. And certainly at other places too, because I know not everybody joining us is from Wayne State. So certainly at other places too, you have to find those opportunities to be able to get involved with those communities. And I was doing a lot. I was volunteering. I also had at any given point between 2 and 3 jobs. I was playing on the club lacrosse team and also very involved in my community. I double majored, double co-majored, and did a dual degree. And so for that reason, I would say, I wish my time management were better. I wish I were able to kind of lock down that skill as an undergrad. And it's something I had to learn a very hard way, kind of like transitioning out of undergrad into law school and also as a practicing lawyer. So I would say do work on that. Another thing I want to say is it's okay to not know the answer. I think in undergrad, especially as I was finishing undergrad, I did so many things that I was like finding myself, like you're a young person and like you're finding yourself, you're figuring out your interests. You're finally in this place where you get to study exactly what you want and you get to choose your classes. Like that's huge. And then toward the end of it, like I had this like very much self-importance, I'm like, I matter, wow, like, and then toward the end of undergrad, I'm like, oh shoot, I have no idea what I'm gonna do with my life. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where to go to law school. I don't know how to apply to law school. And it was sort of this crisis. So I would say it's okay to not know the answer. And that's also something you can take into your legal practice. I would also echo what some of my colleagues have said about being more concise in your writing. I think in undergrad, especially in the liberal arts majors, as a political science major, and also studying international studies and Spanish, sort of ornate, fluffy writing is very encouraged. And law school is not like that. That was very hard for me to learn the first couple of semesters. You need to be concise. You need to get to the point, and don't try to use like nice language that sounds very legalese just to use it. People don't want to read that. They just want an answer to the question. So that's something that I sort of wish that I had learned how to practice. And finally, I think talking to lawyers who like their job. I'm very sad to say that so many lawyers, I think, are very like jaded with the process, which is fine. It's understandable. But I think talking to a lot of lawyers who are like, don't go to law school. It's terrible. You're going to make this expense for no reason and it's never going to pay off. Okay, there's an audience for that sort of rhetoric, but I think also talking to people who like their job, and for me, working in a law office that really felt like family was really great. And I worked there for almost 5 years when I was an undergrad and as I was transitioning out into law school. So find people that you can talk to who really like their job and can give you some advice as to what they do, and get to know what a lawyer does. Really get to know what a lawyer does. Think about yourself in practice and like, what do I want to do? Do I actually want to jump into this, or am I jumping in because it's 3 years, it's 6 semesters, I'm just going to get in, get out, and have this JD. So those are some of my reflections on that.
Danny?
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to echo a lot what everyone is saying, but writing is probably the most important thing. As everyone said, there's a style difference between how we're expected to write in undergrad, like flowery type of writing, beautiful type of writing, and when you get to law school, which is like, just tell me what it is, just get to the point already. In my world, with contracts and transactions, depending on how one sentence is structured, it could mean a big sway of money going one side or another. So you always need to be, wary of the words that the words that we put onto paper, the words that we say. So writing is something that's really, really big. And I think, well, being an undergrad and looking forward, looking to, what law school is and further than that, I do want to say you have to kind of remember just to have fun a little bit too. Like it can all be very stressful to look forward and think, wow, I have 3 years of law school left. And then, well, even now in a pandemic, right? Looking forward to that, and then looking forward, how am I going to get a job afterwards? But I think what you have to realize is at the point you guys are now in undergrad, like you want to have your fun, because once you get to law school, you're going to be super busy with a lot of things. You're going to have plenty of clubs, you're going to have plenty of, organizations you're part of, jobs, all this different stuff. So for the point where you guys are right now, like I do want to just kind of put that out there, make sure to have your fun, go work out, do, play basketball, whatever you guys do for fun, you have to kind of keep that going as well.
And I wanted to add something too, because everybody, 4 or 5 people mentioned writing. Format too matters, right? So like when you talk about good writing, the way you format your documents and your submissions and like proofreading and things like that, those are habits that, I didn't necessarily have when I was an undergrad. I think, investing in a little time and understanding what a clean submission looks like in terms of format and citations and proofreading is like a good skill. I think in undergrad, a lot of the professors do quite a bit of heavy lifting for us when it comes to like proofing documents and sort of marking up papers and things like that. I think the more practice you have with that early on, the better you'll be. So I just wanted to add that.
All right, well, I can continue to play talk show host, but we've got a lot out on the table already, and I'm wondering what our students might want to ask. We have all of these different experiences, and lots of opportunities to go in different directions. So who would like to ask questions?
I have a question. So I'm really curious as to how you guys prepared for your LSAT as an undergrad student. So could you guys talk about like the preparations that you guys took to take the test? Because that's what I'm really curious about.
I'll start this one. I laugh because, as Dr. Roth knows, I famously took the LSAT 3 times. I took a Kaplan course, 2 actually. I took one online and one in person. And I have to say they didn't help me very much. And finally, I used Power Score. I think that's what the books were called. And those made a real difference. So I would invest in some of those books and definitely take as many practice tests as you can. And my biggest advice is that your score is not going to correlate as to how well you do in law school. It is very important. I mean, depending on what school you want to get into, if you're counting on scholarship money, it is very important. So definitely invest the time and energy into it. But don't be discouraged if you don't get a 180.
Their thoughts about LSAT?
Well, I will
ahead.
echo what Gergana said. I also took Kaplan and was not particularly big fan of their product. And then likewise went and ordered the Power Score books off of Amazon, and it substantially increased my score from test 1 to test 2. So I think, I wouldn't endorse Kaplan personally. I found that the Power Score books were very beneficial, and then practice tests, as many as you can take. I mean, I took them every day. I went through various sets of questions. If there was an area that I had a weakness, I would focus on that for a while until I felt comfortable with it. So getting an organized approach to it, and then finding what product works for you. And it may well be that Kaplan's going to work well for you. It just didn't work well for me, and apparently not for Gergana either. So, finding the product that's going to work for you, and then figuring out the scheduling approach as far as, I'm going to take this many tests this week, or do this many questions in a particular day. And then I remember I worked the first time I took it. And then I think the second time I took it, I was not working, but I was in class for a portion of that time when I was studying for it. And so I think being able to balance your time and taking into consideration that if you're dedicating your time to other things like work or whatever else you may have going on in your life, that can have an impact on the amount of time that you can dedicate to studying, obviously, which will correlate with the end result.
I'm going to
Thoughts?
jump in if you guys don't mind.
Blair?
Yeah, I'm going to offer a little bit of a contrast, I guess, to what Gergana and Christopher have said. I took a Kaplan course as well and actually really liked it. And I think that is because I took both Princeton and Kaplan as a board member of the Pre-Law Students Association with Gergana. We had a discount with the Princeton Review, so that's a plug to get involved. So I took an online course with Princeton. It did not work for me. I think it's really important to know what works for you. I couldn't really focus. It just didn't really work for me. The online format was difficult. I realized that is sort of a staple of education right now, but at the time, however many years ago it was, it just didn't work for me. I took a Kaplan course in person and that worked a lot better. I think my instructor was really good at being one-on-one. And like Christopher, I was also actually working at that time. I was working full-time. And so I had to take those classes in the evening and structure my study schedule accordingly, which is certainly possible. I don't necessarily caution against it, but you have to know yourself and you have to know what works for you. And I know that's so cliche, but some people work really well, like studying the book on their own. For me, I need an instructor to be like, hey, here's your schedule. This is what you need to do. This is how you tackle things every day. And if you have questions, come tell me. Excuse me. So I think that it's good to know what works for you. Also, I would echo what they said about please don't obsess over the LSAT. It's very important. It's necessary to get into law school, but it's not the be all end all. I don't really even remember my LSAT score, to be honest. Now that I'm out here on the other side, I'm like, it really does not matter anymore. Someone from my church told me, and it was a bit discouraging, that his first exam in law school was harder than the LSAT. And so I'm not saying that to discourage you, but I don't necessarily know if that was true for me, but it's just sort of like a little bit of a perspective, like you're going to have a lot of exams. The LSAT is an exam. You're going to have a lot of other exams in law school. They are going to be very stressful. Many of them will be the only grade you have in that class for that semester. So it's good to get used to good study habits now, but just know that this test does not define you. And like Gergana said, it is not necessarily an indication of how you're going to perform in law school, as much as LSAC, LSAC would have you believe. It's just sort of not the only metric, at least, and perhaps not the best metric. So those are my words of advice.
Okay, I'll jump in here. And Rich and I studied together, so he can sort of add in, whatever he wants to add. But by a show of hands, by everybody who's out practicing or who finished law school, how many of you guys studied more than 6 months? I'm just curious. Because I hear you guys say you took multiple classes and things like that, so I'm just curious. I would imagine that took a little time. Okay, so Rich and I actually studied for about a year for this exam, and we had the opposite experience of Chris and Gergana, which is we did PowerScore books first, and then we went to Kaplan. And what I found was that it wasn't necessarily the company that mattered, it was the reps that mattered, right? Which was the practice exams, practice questions, right? That what you find with the LSAT is that the test has a structure, it has a sort of formulaic flow to it. And once you sort of see enough questions and you take enough practice exams, it really starts to unravel for you and you sort of see it, right? And so it's really just about coming up with a structured schedule that you can commit to and really, just doing the work, right? And for myself, that involved, taking Saturdays and Sundays in the UGL. It's a pretty empty place on the weekend. And you would just go grab one of those study rooms on the second floor in the back and just cut the cell phone off and get to work. Right. And that was something that was done for, I don't even remember how many weeks, but after a while, it really started paying off. And obviously that was done because there was a sort of a focus on trying to get to a certain school, so focusing on a certain score. But I just think it's about reps. I really do. And I think, you're only doing yourself a favor if you can just pick up a book, order some books, and start familiarizing yourself with the test early. Be careful, because if you do that too early and then you don't really give it the attention it deserves, sometimes you sort of wasted pages in some ways, and then you got to go back and, maybe you've marked up the book, you might want to erase those marks. But I do think familiarizing yourself with the test and just getting those reps is incredibly important. And then simulating like test-like circumstances. But I'll let Richard add.
And I'll add a little bit about our program, and it was a long program. I believe we started with the Kaplan course, if I'm not mistaken. And that
it was definitely Power Square books. It was Power Square.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna recount this a little bit. So we started with the Kaplan course, and that sort of familiarized us with the material. The entire time we knew we would buy Power Score, but we were sort of trying to time it up. I believe someone on this call said that they didn't have a true vision at the end of undergrad. They were kind of like, oh my, like, what am I going to do? I'm going to graduate soon. And I remember Ray and I sat down, I believe it was the semester before we were supposed to graduate, and we took practice LSATs, or maybe it was the fall of the year we were supposed to graduate, so fall 2011, and we took a practice LSAT, and my score was not good, and my brother's score was maybe 2 points higher, I think, and we immediately started panicking because I wanted to take the LSAT like the next month or something. And I had spent the summer just glancing over books and thinking I had a pretty good idea how to do logic games, etc. And just wasn't ready, wasn't anywhere near ready. And so we sat down after a gut check, and Raymond actually developed a very elaborate and comprehensive plan that involved going through all the Power Score books thoroughly, page by page, keeping notebooks on all the books. I think they were called Bibles back then. I don't know if they're still called Power Score Bibles, but they were called Bibles back then. And I think we took, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ray, we took upwards of 25 practice tests or something of that nature.
The number was 25.
And I can't even recall the number of practice sections that I did. And we always did them under time conditions, and sort of being truthful with ourselves about what we did right, what we did wrong. And I also reviewed pretty much every answer explanation I could, whether right or wrong. So it was a very intense process. I was also doing Teach for America at the time in Detroit. So I would literally wake up at like 5 a.m., teach all day until 3:30 to 30:45. By 5 o'clock that evening, I was doing practice sections until about 7 p.m. And then I would grade papers and plan for the next day. And then on the weekends, we would do, I believe it was like half a day, Ray. We would go play basketball for maybe an hour or two, and then just the whole day. LSAT on Saturday, and then practice sections on Sunday. And we did that probably our entire first year of TFA almost, I think. We took the LSAT in June. And I did pretty well as a result of that. But like my brother said, I think the most important thing is understanding where you want to go to law school. Like, what are your goals? Ray and I, we had very specific goals that we were trying to accomplish. And we knew we had to do a particular type of thing, go to a particular type of school to achieve those goals. And we were able to do that. But if that is, if you can get the score that's in the range of the school that you want to go to for the work that you want to do, I would focus on that. I wouldn't get caught up in other people's opinions about your process or your journey because it's very individual. And so I say all that to say, design the LSAT prep program that's for you on a personal level. I know people who went to highly ranked schools did well. I know people who went to lower ranked schools, very low ranked schools, and did awesome. And they ended up in the same place as those people who went to those very highly ranked schools. And so I think it's more about developing a program for you.
Yeah, no, I think everyone pretty much exhausted it. I think you had a lot of good value that came from that. But no, I think the most important part is just know how you study and what type of environments you work best in. If you're a person that just wants to sit down in their own room and sit down for 11 hours and do that. If you're a person who likes to sit down with other people and share different thoughts, and go ahead and do that. But I mean, the most important thing, and I'm sure you guys probably do know by this time, concerning, that you'll be done with undergrad and everything, what's the best method for you? How do you learn in the most efficient manner is kind of, the correct term to put it, because you want to get this through. You don't want to just let it drag on for too long. But I think Gergana, what she said initially, is like once you actually step foot into law school, none of that matters at all. So the LSAT's really important to getting into there, getting your scholarships, because who wants to pay, law school tuition, right? So, get a nice score, get a scholarship, be happy with it. And then the moment you step foot in there, it doesn't matter. If the guy next to you got a 180, if you, the guy, and the person on the left, you got a 1, whatever the lowest score is, who cares? You're all in the same seat, you're all learning the same things. At that point, it just go from there.
Yeah, looking at things from the other side of this, something I always try to get across to people about the LSAT is that it's an instrument that makes sense for admissions offices of law schools because of the logic that drives them. One of them is that the rankings of the law school in U.S. News and World Report is sensitive to the LSAT scores of the incoming classes. And so they have this reason to fixate on the LSAT score that is entirely apart from any actual value of it. But the other thing about it is that if you're just thinking about large numbers and how you're gaming these things in an admissions office, if you've got 100 people who get a 160 and 100 people who get a 150, there's reason to believe that the aggregate performance of the 100 people who get a 160 is going to be better than the aggregate performance of the 100 people who get a 150. But it doesn't tell you anything actually about any given individual who got a 160 vis-a-vis any given individual who got a 150. And so the important thing about this is not to take it personally, no matter what it is. It doesn't make you great if you got a really good score, and it doesn't make you mediocre if you got a really mediocre score. It's just entirely instrumental to the purposes of the law school admissions process.
Yeah, and I know I want to sort of jump in on that. I know that we're taking questions from the crowd, but I think it's really important to know, because Richard flagged it and Ilaria flagged it, and it's, your outcome from law school in terms of employment, it has nothing to do with the LSAT. In a lot of ways, I mean, it has something to do with what school you go to because of recruiters and the way they operate, but I can tell you that, and take it from me, I'm back in Detroit, I was doing the big law thing in New York. It's really on you to network and really define what your legal career is going to be. So I'll just sort of let that hang out there, and I'll take your more specific questions. But I just want to flag that, because I think people, they get caught up in the big law recruiting and the number of people who go to, this firm and that firm out of this school. But, once you're in there are so many people who are unhappy or who moved on. I'm 2 years out from NYU, and I can tell you that none of that mattered. It was really, the most important piece was trying to define your career for you. And I wish, honestly, I would have understood that more before the process started. But it's really on you to define your career. And I think Richard's point about sort of understanding what you're trying to do with your career on the front end is important, because then you can tailor your approach.
By the way, regarding networking, stay tuned, because on December 2nd, we're going to have an event sponsored by the Political Science Department with an employment expert named Beverly Williams, who is going to talk about how to navigate the job market generally, not just for pre-law students, but she is a lawyer. She, in fact, was my co-clerk when we were with the Supreme Court of New Jersey, Chief Justice Robert Wilentz, back in the 1980s. But she's an employment lawyer who has now gone into the business of trying to explain to people what you need to do in the job market, generally speaking, to improve your prospects. And networking is a major theme of hers. So stay tuned for that on December 2nd. Questions from others? Anybody?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
What kind of jobs do you guys recommend, or any advice that you guys have to take during undergrad that helped you prep for law school and helped you in your career after law school? So what kind of jobs should I be looking for? What kind of internships or anything in that sort?
I'm going to jump in really fast. I know I talk a lot, but I know people are going to say get some legal experience. Politics. I know this sounds really weird and it sounds kind of cliche, but the people who were politically engaged, and I don't mean just following politics, the people who worked in politics, in my experience, they came to law school oftentimes knowing, sort of not knowing, but just having a better understanding of what they actually wanted to accomplish in law school, and sort of having a little bit of exposure to some of the issues that you're going to come across as a first year law student. And I guess the point is, institutions make a little more sense to you when you have somewhat of a political background. And I know that doesn't make a lot of sense right now for an undergrad student who hasn't been in law school, but a lot of what you have to understand early as a law student is actually about institutions, specifically courts, but it's more so how courts are interacting with and the rules that they apply and procedures that they apply in interacting with cases that impact institutions. And I know that sounds very abstract, but it's such a big deal. And I can say that having clerked for 2 federal judges, having an understanding of our society and our institutions that we operate around is a big deal for a law student.
I also have some thoughts on this. I worked a lot during undergrad. I've had a lot of jobs. I don't think that there's necessarily like the right kind or the wrong kind. I just think that you need to know what your interests are. And I would recommend working in a legal space. I know that there are certainly people who go to law school without ever having worked in a law office or with lawyers, and I think that's fine. But I think for me, I really needed to know what is being a lawyer like. I knew that I was interested in immigration, and so finding a job at an immigration firm was very instrumental for me. I also worked as a research assistant during undergrad in 2 different departments at Wayne State. That helped me a lot with research, with writing, and being able to communicate with others and sort of talking to my principal investigator, talking to other people on my team about my findings, being able to sort out data. That's very important. And I realized that I understand that your question is about undergrad specifically, but I think also in law school, getting as many, like a diversity of experiences as much as you can. In immigration, there aren't really like plaintiffs and defendants, but to the extent that we can say that, I worked like with the plaintiffs, I worked with the defendants, I worked in a defense firm, and I also worked with the government. And my last summer in law school, I worked at the Harvard Immigration and Refugee Clinic. And I think that that was a very instrumental experience as well, sort of nonprofit, but also very, very much involved in impact litigation and things that are pushing the bar forward in the law. And I would not have gotten there if it were not for the experience that I had built up over years, culminating to that last year of law school. So I guess in conclusion, there's no really right or wrong answer necessarily, but just do what interests you. Like if you're interested in health law and you want to go work in a hospital, or you want to go work under a hospital administrator, that's not a wrong answer. It's not necessarily a legal job, but it's certainly important to understanding the inner workings of the things that you're interested in. So that would be my recommendation.
My first legal job in undergrad was actually with the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. Where I am now in a corporation, not related to that at all. But I think it's actually a great place to be personally, because they have such a variety of work that's done there. You have white collar crimes, you have special victims, you have juvenile divisions, you have finance, criminal, whatever it is, right? So in my opinion, I'm not necessarily plugging in. Of course, it's it's your own preference, but being in undergrad, kind of getting the first taste of, all right, what does a courtroom look like? What is the procedure look like? Sitting down with the prosecuting attorney, being able to ask them questions, how they kind of formulate a case, how they go about depositions, all this different type of stuff. That was very helpful for me. So the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office was my first legal job. I think that was the end of junior year of undergrad, senior, something like that.
So I did some sort of legal type work kind of before law school. I interned in a law firm, was a personal injury firm. And then I ended up going back to that firm as a law student and spending a summer working with them again. And I think it was valuable. You kind of get insight into what a lawyer's day-to-day life is in the office. And if you're lucky and they bring you to court hearings with them, you kind of get to see what that's like. You get to help with the preparation to some extent. I think the issue the thing that makes it hard is that before you even get to law school, you really don't know what you don't know. And it's hard you want to tell the attorney that you're working with that, hey, I'll take this research assignment. But in reality, you have no clue how to do that legal research. And it's, it can be good practice, but I think it's better from my perspective, it's better for the purposes of observing what it is that attorneys actually do, what the life of an attorney is like, and maybe actually getting to see if you like that area of law. If you're able to, sit in on a client interview or those sorts of things, whether or not that area of law is something that you're actually interested in. I also did various different works, different types of jobs in undergrad. Like I said, I worked in a firm for a little bit during one of my undergraduate summers. I also worked in a garden center and a produce market. Whatever pays the bills when you're an undergrad, that's kind of the key. I will say, don't necessarily let yourself get hung up on one area of law. I went into law school thinking I wanted to do a particular area of law. And then I ended up not anywhere close to that. In fact, the area of law that I'm working now, I never even thought about working in family law. I oftentimes said, why would I want to work in family law? I don't want to deal with people's personal problems on that level. And then I ended up working in this area of law, and actually I found it to be really interesting, really enjoyable and fulfilling area of law. So I think, that's where get as much diversity as you can as far as work experience, because you can find these areas of law that you would have just wrote off that actually end up really speaking to you or being something that you're really interested in. At the same time, if you want to do a certain area of law, then pursue that by all means. So that's kind of my take on it.
So my advice would just be give yourself a chance to get inspired, and I think that really just goes back to the points that you've heard, which is, just try things, whether it's, canvassing in an effort to increase, voting participation, whether it's, asylum cases, maybe you're working at, a call center because, there's some sort of political issue that, you're trying to sort of spread information about, just different types of things, right? Like, because you really don't know. Again, I'll go back to my earlier point. I thought I knew what I wanted. Roth can tell you I had I just knew I was going to be a junior partner by now, but no, that's not what happened. I found myself not really interested in the things that I thought I was interested in. And, my life has sort of taken a very different turn. So again, I just, give yourself a chance to be inspired. There are so many ways to use your JD. Everybody here, well, actually, I think everybody but me is like quote unquote a practicing attorney. I'm not right now. And that's because I'm actually pursuing things that don't necessarily require that JD, but there's sort of a JD advantage to what I'm doing. So again, just give yourself a chance to be inspired is what I would say.
Other questions? Yeah, Jada?
Yeah, I have a question. Hi, everybody. So my question is more so directed at um just different ways to navigate different fields of law. I know, Chris, you were touching on it more so, but I mean, even if you don't foresee yourself in a certain field of law, how do you navigate through that in finding yourself in family or whichever law that you particularly weren't focused on at first, right? And then obviously, if you don't know anything about that category, how do you navigate through that and just discover, from the basis of your JD and everything that every experience that, you incorporate within that?
Um, I'll jump in. So I am an ERISA litigator. And technically, I'm a commercial litigator, but I'm primarily do ERISA. And most lawyers, when they hear the word ERISA, they cringe because it's very complicated and it's very boring to most people. And the way I fell into this is I just love the law. And I remember being an undergrad in Professor Ross' classes, his classes at Wayne State. And I would read books like Jeffrey Tubin's The Nine, all this stuff about legal history and the courts and how the law has impacted society. And what it's turned into for me, it's just a love for the law. And it just so happened that at my firm, the partners that I work with now, uh, they recognize that in me. They said, hey, here's a kid who just really, really wants to be a good lawyer. And so they asked me to be a part of their team and, gave me the opportunity to learn this area of the law. And honestly, things have been really, really tough these past few months billing, just because like the hours are a lot right now. But most of the time, I'll say 70% of my time being a law firm associate, it doesn't feel like I'm working at all. I just feel like I'm doing what I love. And so I would just try to do things that make you feel good within the law. And if you're feeling good, you'll fall into the right thing.
Yeah, I think, and I'll let Chris elaborate on this, but because I think he touched on it. But a lot of times it's where the opportunity is, right? So you sort of, if you're lucky, you get the job, and then you kind of don't really know what you're going to be doing. You sort of get there, and then you sort of fall into what you fall into. And I think Richard hinted at it a little bit. I think in his situation, he was very lucky. I think he was very fortunate because he had partners taking interest in him, right? And he's been provided an opportunity to grow and develop in an area of law. And so, bless him for that. But I didn't get that, right? Like I had a very different experience at a law firm. I never really clicked with anybody. But there was a particular area of law that I sort of got a lot of reps in, and it was because that's where the opportunity was. So I did a lot of sort of diligence around rep and warranty insurance, and I know that means, it's like a foreign language to you right now, but I got a lot of experience there, and that's because there was a partner who was willing to give me the work. I could do the work, and it wasn't painful for me to do the work, right? And I had no idea what it was prior to even starting my job. So for me, it was just like the way I see it is like follow the opportunity, follow the feeling, right? Because you don't know, and you won't know. You if you're lucky enough to find out in law school, bless you, bless your heart. But I feel like in my experience, most people really don't know until after they get out of law school. And in the first few years, good luck trying to figure it out, again, unless you're just really lucky or there's some sort of thing that clicks. That's just the way I sort of see it, but I'll let others speak to it.
Yeah, I would agree with Ray 100%. So the way I was placed in commercial real estate and finance. So when I was a summer associate, I got to pick kind of a bunch of different types of assignments in different practice groups to try things out. And even those assignments are sort of limited because there's a lot of things that summer associates can't do, or a lot of work that just has a very fast turnaround that we can't handle. And at the end of that, we got to rank the groups that we were interested in. And really at the end of the summer, I still didn't know. I had figured out that I wanted to do transactional over litigation. So that was kind of helpful, but there's such a large variety of transactional work. So I ranked 3 groups, and then the firm just placed me wherever they needed me. And then within my group, I find real estate actually to be very, very varied. There's a lot of energy work. There's a lot of construction and design work. There's a lot of finance work, and all those things are different, but they're connected by commercial real estate at the core. And different partners work on different things, and they basically just hand off work. And if you do a good job, then they'll come back to you. So it is a lot of luck, I would say, and basically where the need is. And I don't know. I mean, it's fairly enjoyable as far as how to navigate it if you don't know anything about it. I mean, I didn't know much about real estate besides taking 1L property law, and you would just learn on the job. And I think that's true for everyone on this call. You learn a lot on the job, and just learn by practicing and getting involved in different cases and different transactions. So yeah, I hope that answered your question a bit.
So I think Ray made a really good point that a lot of times it really is where the opportunity is available to you. For me, it kind of worked that way, and it kind of was that I was trying to get into a law clerking position. So I knew I wanted to law clerk after law school. So I was setting myself up to try and get into one of those positions. And on the state court level, a lot of times clerkship positions are available when they're available. It's not like the federal courts where they have a system set up where you apply at a certain time, you interview at a certain time, you get offers at a certain time. With the state courts, it's, when they need a law clerk, they put their posting out there and you apply for it. So that's kind of how it worked for me. My last internship in law school was with court administration. And I took that internship specifically because I knew it would give me the opportunity to work with all of the judges in that particular court, as opposed to interning with one specific judge. And so I did some research projects for various judges. I got to work with several different law clerks in both general trial, criminal, law clerks for criminal judges. And then, when the position came available in the family law division, it wasn't the area of law where I thought I was going to end up, but the opportunity was there. And so I applied for it, and, it was a match, and it worked out that way. I think as far as, trying to figure out and get exposure to these different areas of law, which I think was your initial question, it can be tricky because you can't intern or do an internship in every area of law, right? You only have so much time to intern and so many internship opportunities. So, focusing those internships on the areas of law that you think you're most interested in is important. But if you want exposure to various different types of law, one thing that I wish I would have done more of in my first year of law school, or even as an undergrad, but it never really crossed my mind, is that you can go and observe court proceedings. Courtrooms are public forums, and now, because of the current circumstances, most court proceedings are being broadcasted on YouTube or through Zoom. And so you can look at whatever your local court's website is and see if there's a particular issue coming up, a family law issue or a trust and estates issue or a criminal matter that you might be particularly interested in, or something that you've just never heard of and you think, well, I better check this area of law out. You can Zoom in or appear in person if the courtroom's open for those sorts of things. And that's a great way to kind of get that, what do lawyers do in the courtroom in reality, not just what you see on TV, exposure, and also a great way to see what it is that they're talking about in these areas of law. Why is this case being argued in front of this judge? And is that something that I might be interested in doing in the future? And also, it can be a good opportunity to network. Lawyers generally tend to be very busy, but I have had the opportunity come up where I've been sitting in the gallery of a courtroom, proceeding ended, the attorney was walking out, and it was an area of law that I was very interested in. And so I took the opportunity to introduce myself to them, ask for a business card, let them know that I'm interested in that area of law, and that I followed up with an email later on. And it's just another opportunity to network, make connections, get your name out there, and that can give you some exposure in that regard too. So I hope that helps answer your question.
I think another thing that's really important is, so once you're done with undergrad, that Dell said everything, is when you choose what law school that you decide to go to, whatever factors you have in mind. One of my factors was real world experience, real world opportunities. And Wayne State actually offered plenty of those. So so something to consider once you do make that jump, right, is you want to be able to see, okay, so after you're done with your first year, we have to take, you have a set of classes, right? You can't sway outside of that. Everyone the first year takes the same thing. Then when you get to your second year, that's when you have more options, right? So I was able to do a judicial externship where I was able to work for a federal judge. Now I followed that with a corporate externship where I was able to work for a corporation. Two vastly different type of things, but at the same time, while you're in law school, second year, your 2L year, you just kind of get to experience different things. I enjoyed working with the federal judge, and I still keep in touch with them, but that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be in a courtroom. I went to the corporate counsel position, and that kind of resonated with me. I felt more comfortable there. And that's the path that I kind of followed across. So just putting yourself in as many different rooms as possible, and then whichever one kind of clicks with you, wherever you feel the most comfortable. I think Richard said the energy that kind of comes with it, right? Like you just kind of feel as if like this is where I'm supposed to be, type of thing. So yeah, so just put yourself in as many different rooms as possible and get that experience in there, and then you'll just kind of find your way through it.
I think what everyone said about networking is so important. And I think also what Christopher said about going to watch some court proceedings is also very important. And two things come to mind. One is that a friend who just passed the bar and is working at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, the way she knew she wanted to be a prosecutor, she used to go to like different county courts and just watch proceedings. And she was like, I really like what the prosecutors are doing here. I think I want to be a prosecutor. And now she's there. So that's one thing to do. And you learn a lot about court proceedings and sort of like the law just generally when you do things like that. And like Christopher said, it's open to the public, so you might as well. Also, I remember my first year in law school, and this certainly could have happened as an undergrad. I went to a Women Lawyers Association of Michigan meeting by myself. I was so scared. I didn't know anybody. I was like 2 weeks into law school, and I was like, I don't know anybody. I ended up meeting a lawyer who still serves as a mentor to me. She invited me to a networking event the next day. At that one, I met her husband, and he was like, would you like to shadow me in court? And so I started shadowing him in court, and he literally just like took me around with him. He took me to meetings with clients after their permission, of course, and he would like show me how he negotiates with the prosecutor for a better deal for his clients, and just little things like that. I'm sure many lawyers would be happy to have undergrad law students, whoever, shadowing them. It's kind of an ego stroke in some ways, like, oh, this person wants to watch what I do every day. So find somebody who's willing to do that and can mentor you in those spaces. I think that's really important. As some people said, like work in different offices, work in different capacities, that really helps. Ask for different projects if you are already working in some space. I worked in an employment firm during undergrad in addition to the immigration firm, and I would ask for different projects like than the ones I would typically do on a day-to-day basis, just to get an idea of what other things like other people get to experience. Go to events like this. So much praise to all of you who are here, hearing from all of these different attorneys, and I'm sure all of them would welcome your follow-up if you ever had any questions. That's a really big way. I used to go to these panels as an undergrad too, and just follow up with some of the attorneys and be like, hey, you mentioned this, that's really interesting. How'd you get into that? Don't be afraid to do things like that. And I think also professors are so instrumental, especially when you're in school, so instrumental to helping you find the right opportunities. When I was in law school, the reason that I came to the Attorney General Honors Program here in DC is because one of my professors in law school encouraged me to apply. And had she not, I would not have known that this program exists. Similarly, many of the internships that I landed, particularly the one at Harvard, I would not have known about it if a professor had not pointed me in that direction. And sort of, helped me with the application process. So if there's something you're interested in, you can certainly ask your professors if they know anything about it, or if they know people who might be interested in helping you and ushering you into that area of the law. And finally, I would say something like what Denny said, like find a law school that has like a good program for what you want to do. I went to Detroit Mercy. It is very public interest focused. It is very community focused. It is a Jesuit school, so obviously service is a big part of their mission, and that is very important to me. And other schools do other things that may be important to you as well. So that is something to keep in mind.
And I just want to say, last point on this topic is lawyers love to talk about themselves. I mean, absolutely love. I mean, as you all can hear, we're all just going on and on about how this applies to us. And so the number one networking point is when you meet new attorneys and you think you're interested in what they do, get them talking about themselves. And you'll be surprised how that will just help you. And I know it sounds like a simple point, but it's so critical because that's what we all do. We talk about ourselves all day long.
Okay. Well, we've had you here for almost an hour and a half. I don't know whether there are any other pressing questions from audience members, or whether there are any sort of final comments that people on the panel would like to make in the last few moments.
I have a final comment, if that's okay.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay.
Okay. I don't want to like turn this to a dark place, but I do want to say, guys, I struggled a lot with my anxiety when I was an undergrad, and I did not know that I was struggling with anxiety. And I grew up in a culture that does not like to talk about mental health issues, very, very taboo. I was not encouraged to seek help. I just want to say that this is an anxiety provoking process. I know a lot of you seem concerned about the LSAT and applications, and even when you get into law school, it's going to be anxiety provoking. There's a lot of pressure on you to do certain things. So please be in touch with yourself, be in touch with your mental health, know what's right for you, get the help you need if you need it, talk about it. Don't be afraid to talk about those things, despite the fact that it's not very encouraged. We are trying to be better, I think, in the legal field about discussing those things, but sadly, lawyers have a very high rate of like substance abuse and alcohol abuse, and it's really terrible to see. So we as young lawyers and as undergrads and as future law students need to be really good about kind of like pushing back on that stigma and being really good about getting in touch with the right resources to help ourselves. So don't be afraid if you have any issues with that. That is completely normal. I think almost everybody goes through it, and you just got to learn how to deal with it.
Right.
I just wanted to go back to the networking piece. I feel really fortunate and blessed with the experiences I've been able to get and the way everything worked out for me professionally. And I think the critical piece there was whether it was the pre-law school programs that I participated in that created the opportunities for employment that follow law school or during law school, or whether it was not being, afraid to walk up to Dr. Roth and asking questions about like law school, his experience in law school, and whether he had recommendations or Professor Krause, or just having the humility to ask the questions, walk up to people, show an interest and follow up. It's really been the transformative piece to all of like my story and everything that has happened for me. So just network, do it in a sincere way. And just, send those follow-up emails, man, because you really never know who takes you serious or who just likes you for whatever weird reason. And some of it is like, I use the word humility. Some of it is having the humility to do it, but some of it also is just having the courage. Like, I think it's the Wayne Gretzky line, right? You miss every shot you don't take. That's so true. You're going to get one person to respond to a follow-up email out of every, 20 or 15 or whatever. But that one person could really change your life or really give you the opportunity that you were looking for. So just do it. Sometimes it sucks. Sometimes it feels weird, but just do it. And I think, everybody here tonight, and I think networking was a piece to everybody's story here at some point. And so it's really I think the critical piece to all of this.
Anything else before we close the formal proceedings, and I'll and turn off the recording and let people do whatever they want. But I want formally, at least, to thank all of the members of this panel, and including special guest star. And so it's really been remarkable to have you all in one place here to give all this wonderful advice to people. And it will be recorded, as you see, and sent off through the network of the Pre-Law Student Association so that other people can take advantage of it. And so thank you all very much.
Thank you guys for sharing tonight.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you all for allowing me to crash.
Yes.
Thank you all for allowing me to crash.
Time and this space. This was excellent, and it was really nice to get in touch. It's been very isolating these last few months, so it's so nice to get in touch with people who are pursuing this career.
Yeah.
And feel free to reach out. I think I speak for all of us when I say that.
Yep, definitely. Dr.
Yeah,
Roth, you
absolutely.
have our emails. You can
Yes.
disseminate them.
Yes, you can always,
Yeah,
if you,
yeah,
if
and
you
I
want to
put
get in
my-
touch with any of these people, you can email me and I can forward the email address.
Yeah, I put my email in the chat when, I saw students there, and for some reason it came from Professor Roth, and I was like, he wants me to put my email, and I didn't realize it was addressed to you guys. But no, my email is in the group chat, so feel free to just take it off if you guys want to reach out.
Yeah, and anyone can find me online. You can just look me up and find me at my firm email or on LinkedIn. I'm always available. I absolutely love helping younger students. People helped me. People like
Yeah.
Professor Roth helped me. And
Yeah.
so, even tonight, I'm exhausted after my deposition, but when my brother told me to jump on this call, I didn't hesitate because we have to pay it forward. Absolutely. So.
Right, I will turn off here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Roth, for the invitation.